So the 2025 NFL draft is not that far away, and we're hearing a lot of reports and rumors. We're hearing a lot of different things with a lot of these different players coming out in the NFL draft. And we got a couple of interesting updates. You know, one of the things that I do personally is I try reaching out to all the different scouts that I know. I try reaching out to any of the people within NFL departments that I may know, and I just like to ask them general questions. Try getting ready. You know, I work for the Hula Bowl as a scout. So part of the process is trying to find under the radar prospects, try getting background into certain guys. And then honestly, the most important thing for me is try to get some rankings on where certain teams are kind of ranking some of these guys. You know, one of the reasons right now why we don't really know which quarterback's going to go number one, which quarterback's going to not get drafted at all, is because the updated reports that the NFL generally follows has not been released, right? You got the National and Bledsoe, which are the two biggest scouting agencies. Basically, every single team utilizes one or the other. The updated rankings have not come out, right? So we're at the point where, you know, the NFL draft analysts out there, right? The guys that work for The Athletic, that work for ESPN and the NFL Draft Network, one of the things is they don't have these updated rankings, and teams aren't just generally putting these out there, right? Like the Bears aren't just putting out their quarterback rankings. Ryan Poles and Dave Ziegler aren't just putting it out there that, hey, this is who we have ranked. Where ultimately a lot of what ends up happening is the draft analysts wait for those reports to ultimately come out. But I spoke to a scout that I know that actually works with the Seattle Seahawks, and just kind of talking to this guy, he told me guys that he was intrigued with, and there's one guy specifically that I feel like people aren't. I shouldn't say that. You know, this guy's one of those guys that I think over the past week his stock has risen a lot, right? It's been crazy with this guy. And we'll talk about him a little bit later on. But first and foremost, I think the big news that's kind of come out over the past couple of days is Shedeur Sanders has officially committed to the NFL draft, right? He's officially committed to the league. I don't know if this is the way this guy wanted to actually put it out there that he's going into the NFL, but check out the video and we'll talk about this on the other side.
Hey, real quick, listen up. 8:30 a.m. registration. 8:30 a.m. No one is to miss. So we got that?
Registration what?
For what?
Voting.
I said voting.
I'm going to the said voting.
Donald J. Trump.
Boy, dominate on me, dominate on 3, 1, 2, 3.
Dominate. So we gotta be here. We just submit it.
I'll be in the league.
Boy got registration, man.
Hey.
Coming back next year.
Hey.
Boy got registration.
Do not wish that on me, man. Hey, man, it's said and done, man.
Hey, I feel you.
Hey, registration. I know after last game, man, y'all not gonna see me.
Hey, man.
For a good minute.
So there you guys have it, right? Sanders is basically saying, man, I'm going to the league, smiling, happy, excited. He was asked if he was going to register, or not asked, but, you know, a statement was being made. You got to register for your classes for next semester. And Sanders basically put it out there that he's going to the league, so he's not going to register for classes. Now, he clarified, right? He said that he's graduating early. That's the real reason he's not going to be registering. Now, this is not shocking, right? A lot of people already knew Shedeur Sanders is most likely coming out, but it wasn't guaranteed, right? There were reports that Sanders could get, you know, an NIL deal, right? Maybe it's $5, $6, $7 million to stay at Colorado, or maybe even transfer, right? And the transferring part doesn't obviously make sense, but maybe he gets paid to stay behind, or maybe he feels like, hey, you know, I'm going to be a top 10 pick, but I want to be the number 1 overall pick. We've heard a lot of these quarterbacks that are failing in the NFL, and one of the things that I've been hearing a lot from some of these scouts is quarterbacks should stay in college as long as possible. Right, and one of the changes we are going to start to see is quarterbacks are going to start to stay 5 years in college. We're going to see this happen over the next 10 years. A lot of quarterbacks, Arch Manning will be a great example of this. Manning's in year 2 right now. He'll start next year in year 3. He might play 3 years in college, year 3, 4, and 5, before he ultimately comes out. We're going to get quarterbacks that are going to end up staying a lot longer in college as opposed to coming out because of the fact that teams are writing quarterbacks off like that, right? If a quarterback does not come in, sometimes 8, 9 games, they're out of there if they're not showing any sort of upside. Anthony Richardson played 7 games for the Indianapolis Colts. Bryce Young had his first year, obviously, in which it was an up and down year, and he had like 2 games, and by week 3, he was already kind of benched, right? Obviously, Bryce Young is now the Panthers quarterback once again, but you can see like the leash isn't that long for some of these quarterbacks. So some people actually thought Shedeur Sanders might actually stay behind. Now, I think it's smart for him to actually come out. Talking to this scout that I spoke to, one of the things he talked about with Sanders is that we don't know what this guy can actually become. Like, his upside's so much higher than what a lot of us realize. And a big part of that is because the offense he's in right now kind of limits him a little bit, right? He's playing a lot of shotgun, right? On top of that, from a tendency standpoint, you can kind of predict what Colorado does depending on the packages they put out there. You can predict what they're kind of doing with the guys they're out there. Although it's gotten better the past 2 games, you can still kind of predict what Colorado's going to do, and they're way too pass heavy. And the scout that I spoke to said that he thinks that if Sanders can actually go into an NFL offense, think Ben Johnson, think Bobby Slowick. Maybe it's a different coordinator, but a guy that's a top tier coordinator, if they can get their hands on a guy like Shedeur Sanders, we're talking about like CJ Stroud potentially, right? Like, that's the upside Sanders has. Now, about 2 weeks back, I personally said that I think Cam Ward might be my number 1 quarterback. After talking to this scout and talked to a couple other guys as well, I think Shedeur Sanders is definitely QB1 in this class, and I don't think it's I shouldn't say I don't think it's close, but I think Cam Ward's a really, really good player, but I think Shedeur Sanders has higher upside, right? So to me, I think a team's going to draft one of those guys based off of if they want to take the upside and the potential, right, which is through the roof with the guy like Shedeur Sanders. Or with Cam Ward, you kind of see what you're getting. I do think Shedeur Sanders plays a lot faster than Cam Ward, and I think teams are gonna look at that and see that the guy that's faster, it'll translate a little bit better as well. And I think with Sanders, I think he's gonna be the number 1 overall pick, right? And to me, it doesn't make sense for him to go back to college, obviously, but he's already put it out there that he's essentially going to be coming out. And we also got some other news, right? And I just want to touch on this before I talk a little bit about the LSU quarterback, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. USC has decided to bench quarterback Miller Moss, and they're going to roll forward with Jaden Mava as their quarterback. And I think this is very, very interesting because Miller Moss, if he finished the season off strong, could have ultimately came out and potentially been a first-round pick, depending on how he does this season, right? And truth be told, when you looked at his game last year, right, that bowl game, when you looked at the first couple of weeks, that Michigan game, right, the second half of it, Miller Moss looked really, 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 really good. But when you look at the last 4 to 5 games, there's so many bad moments. There's interceptions. There's bad passes. He's not able to move. And, I'm not sure if it's because USC's offensive line has been struggling a little bit. Their left tackle hasn't been great. They've had some injuries on the offense side of the football. And I also feel like they're not running the football as much as I think they should. I think that's also kind of led to Miller Moss not being able to have success. And with that, you can tell this guy feels the pressure. And with that, he's also making some bad decisions. And now USC is ultimately going to bench Miller Moss. And this is huge for the 2025 NFL draft. Not saying Miller Moss was going to 100% come out, but the fact that there was a potential for this guy to come out. And all the upside he had shown on, early on, and all the different things this guy was doing from an arm perspective. He was looking really, really good on tape. And it got really bad over the past couple of weeks. And we're at the point where this guy's probably going to end up transferring out of there. And there's some teams he can definitely go to. Maybe you go to a team like Michigan, right? Michigan's quarterback play has been kind of inconsistent. You can also go to some of these other teams. Georgia has Carson Beck. I don't know if Carson Beck's going to stay there past this year. But there's good programs that this guy can go to. And I say good programs because USC is just not a good program. I don't know how else to say this, USC has been that team for so long where, you're in LA, right? You're in Los Angeles, Southern California. The pool of players USC can bring in is massive, right? You should be able to have a lot of success, and they're just not able to get over the top, right? And I almost feel like Lincoln Riley is too, partly to blame for that. Lincoln Riley does a great job running in offense. He does a great job with his quarterbacks, but sometimes he also puts the defense in a bad spot, right? And I just feel like USC has to figure it out because USC is a great program. It's one of the top programs in California, obviously. I just don't love Miller Moss being benched, right? But keep in mind, if Miller Moss started the rest of the season, he probably wouldn't have came out for the draft anyways. But I still do think that USC would have been better off keeping Miller Moss because you get those reps, you essentially get better, and then you come into your second year, which ultimately would have been next year as a starter. And I think USC would have had a real shot next year, right? USC had Bear Alexander, the defensive tackle, opt out. Essentially, he's transferring out of USC. I know they had a linebacker as well that's transferring out. these guys are leaving USC for a reason, right? To me, you got to be able to have success, and it starts with the quarterback position. It starts with the offense. We'll see what happens, right? I do think Jaden Mava has upside. We'll see what ends up actually happening. Sophomore quarterback, right? It's a tall task. Plus, you got Wisconsin. It's not an easy team to be able to beat. Jordan Mava, you guys can see some of his stats at a UNLV last year: 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 3,000 yards. This year, he's thrown the ball 11 times, 66 yards. I think that's just been in kind of a relief role after Miller Moss ultimately blew out a couple of teams early on. I don't love it, but I understand why Lincoln Riley's ultimately moving off of it. But let's wrap this video up, man. Let's talk a little bit about a guy that I've been hearing a lot about. And this one's interesting, right? Because LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier is an interesting player, right? He has 9 interceptions this year. He has 20 touchdowns up to this point. And it's not like he's absolutely dominating, right? Like, he's had some games where he's looked really, really, really good. But he's had other games where it's just kind of inconsistent, right? It's a lot of turnovers. But from what I heard, right, this is talking to one of the scouts that works in the NFL, he thinks that Garrett Nussmeier might actually be the number 1 overall pick, right? He thinks that this guy actually has the potential to end up being that quarterback that goes first overall. And he did say that part of that is projecting a little bit based off of how LSU finishes this year. It's also based on if he actually does come out, and at this point, we don't really know. He's a redshirt junior, so he could technically go back to school for 1 more year. But this scout actually thinks that based off of what Garrett Nussmeier has done from a pure tape perspective, not looking at the interceptions, but from a pure tape perspective, this guy has a really, really good arm. And some teams are going to value that over the playmakers, right? The guys that can create. This scout thinks that Garrett Nussmeier, the fact that this guy has a really good arm, it's accurate ball placement, velocity, he stays within the pocket. He can make plays. Obviously, he's not great at that, but he has a really, really good arm. And that's really the point, right, that I'm trying to get to, is that some teams might actually value a pocket passer over a guy that creates plays with his legs. Now, I don't know if it's going to exactly work like that as we kind of go forward. But over the past, I'd say 5 to 10 years, we've seen this shift in the NFL where teams are no longer taking guys that are pocket passers, right? Guys that are pure pocket passers that would have been like top 5, top 10 picks 30 years ago. They're not being picked that high, right? Nowadays, it's guys like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud is guys that can move essentially, right? Get out of the pocket. Justin Herbert is a good example of that as well, right? He's the guy that can get out of the pocket. He can make defensive linemen miss. He can make linebackers miss. Joe Burrow's another guy that can kind of get out of there. These quarterbacks have been valued a lot higher recently. And with that, we're also seeing guys like Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe is another guy that's being ranked really, really high. We're seeing these guys ranked a lot higher because they can create plays, right? And Garrett Nussmeier, although he can create, he's not as quick as those guys. But some people think that his ability to throw the football on a dime could make him ultimately the number 1 overall pick and the number 1 quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft. Now, obviously, one of the things you guys got to know is a lot of this stuff's still going to change, right? Because we still have like 4 or 5 more games left. We have bowl games as well, right? We got the playoffs and those type of things. So a lot of this stuff will kind of change as we go forward. But I wanted to just bring this guy up because I think we got to keep an eye on Garrett Nussmeier. I think there's some upside with him. I think he could be a really, really good quarterback in the NFL. Does he come back to college? It's possible, right? I think as we kind of finish this season off, we'll find out how many teams actually want to draft quarterbacks. There's teams, for example, like the Jets who have Aaron Rodgers. If the Jets win, 7-8 games, right, of their remaining schedule and they make the playoffs, they might not actually want to say, hey, let's get a quarterback. If the Saints win 4 or 5 games, right, they fired their coach yesterday. If they get hot, win 4, 5, 6 games, they can roll forward with Derek Carr next year. At that point, how many teams are really saying we need a quarterback? The Panthers, it wouldn't make sense for them to draft the quarterback. They got to revamp that entire team before they even consider bringing another quarterback in. The Raiders are a team that are potentially going to go out there and get a quarterback. But how many quarterbacks are actually going to come out, right? We know Shedeur Sanders has already said he's coming out. Cam Ward's a 5th-year player. He has to come out. Jalen Milroe is probably going to come out as well. Carson Beck will probably come out, right? So there's a lot of quarterbacks that are going to potentially come out in this class. So is Garrett Nussmeier actually going to come out? It's going to be an interesting thought. We'll see what ends up happening. I do like his upside. I'm not 100% sure if I would say he's my number one quarterback at this point. I still have Sanders at the top, Cam Ward right underneath him. I do think there's a small gap from there, and then I have Jalen Milroe right about there as well. And I think Garrett Nussmeier is right about there as well, right? He's definitely tier 2 for me at this point. There's probably a couple of the quarterbacks. Drew Aller's another guy I like in tier 2. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, man. I just wanted to kind of make a quick video talking about some of what we're kind of hearing, and just bring you guys NFL draft news, talk a little bit about college football and those type of things. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.